They arrive without warning, bone-white giants cloaked in silence and fire. One moment the battlefield is chaos. The next, calm breaks as thunder, and the Deathwing step through the storm. Terminator-armored and unmoved by fear, they are not simply warriors. They are judgment incarnate. The Deathwing is the first company of the Dark Angels chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, but calling them merely an elite formation misses the truth entirely. To the Imperium's enemies, they are a nightmare given form. To the chapter, they are the soul of the First Legion made manifest, the point of the blade, the wall that never yields. They are the hammer that falls last and hardest. No other first company among the Adeptus Astartes maintains its entire fighting strength exclusively in Terminator armor. The Deathwing does. While other chapters might reserve a few squads or deploy elite elements sparingly, the Deathwing takes to the field en masse in tactical dreadnought plate. This alone marks them apart. But it is not the armor that makes the Deathwing what they are. It is what they represent. They are not simply the veterans of the chapter. They are its memory, its voice, and its judgment. The Deathwing stands as the oldest and most hallowed warband of the Dark Angels, tracing its lineage directly back to the days of the Great Crusade and beyond, to the formation of the original legions Astartes. Born of the First Legion, the Deathwing carries within it the cultural heart of the Dark Angels, a brotherhood bound not just by war, but by shared secrecy and ancient shame. Their duty, their discipline, their silence, these are not just battlefield tactics, they are tenets. To serve in the Deathwing is not merely an honor, it is an oath, and one taken with open eyes and closed mouths. Every warrior in its ranks has been tested not only in blood and battle, but in spirit. They are inducted slowly, not just into the first company's strength, but into its truth. It is a truth that weighs on the soul. To the outside world, the Deathwing are unrelenting, unstoppable, and aloof. They do not speak much. They do not linger after battle. When they fight beside other Imperial forces, they offer no explanations. They simply arrive, destroy, and depart. Many find this unnerving. Some find it arrogant. But the Deathwing does not exist to be understood. They exist to ensure that some things never escape the shadows. When the Deathwing deploy, it is never without purpose. Though they are masterful in siege-breaking and attrition warfare, their true specialty is precision, the targeted strike, the surgical removal of key resistance. Often their strikes are so rapid and so specific that those fighting beside them never truly grasp what occurred. An enemy warlord disappears from the battlefield in a blaze of teleportation energy. A cult's demagogue is slain before his final speech finishes. A demon host, cloaked in the guise of a priest, vanishes in a burst of bone-white light. These are not accidents. Every deployment of the Deathwing is a thread in a larger tapestry, one that only they and the inner circle see in full. Their war gear reflects this singular purpose. They bear the best relics and weapons the chapter can offer, from storm bolters that bark judgment to thunder hammers that crush armor like brittle glass, to the ritual maces of absolution wielded by their most elite. The Deathwing's arsenal is ancient, honored, and feared. Each weapon is maintained not just for function, but for tradition, bound in oath scrolls and sanctified with rites whispered in Calibanite dialects long lost to the rest of the galaxy. Their armor is bone white, a stark contrast to the dark green of the chapter's standard livery. The color is more than symbolic. It is a statement of mortality, a reminder that all warriors of the Deathwing are prepared to die in battle, and that they already have in a way. When they don the armor, they leave behind their name, their rank, their past. They become something else entirely. A brother in silence, a knight of vengeance, a warden of truths better left buried. Those who serve in the Deathwing carry themselves with the gravity of this knowledge. They do not boast, they do not waver, and they do not explain. That silence, too, is a weapon. In it lies the weight of 10,000 years of shame and 10,000 years of redemption. They are not fanatics, they are not zealots, they are not blind, but they are loyal, not only to the Emperor and the Imperium, but to something more specific and more painful, the legacy of the Lion and the ruin of Caliban. That scar is burned into every bolt they fire and every step they take. When the Imperium bleeds and the tides of heresy rise, the Deathwing are summoned, not with banners or fanfare, but with ancient codes whispered through astropathic echoes. They come not to reinforce, but to end the matter. Their methods are rarely gentle, their presence is always final, and then they are gone. Records will show a decisive push, victory, perhaps costly, names of fallen heroes, an after-action report filed by another commander. But those records will never mention the squad of bone-white giants who appeared from nowhere, shattered the enemy's will, and vanished as though they were never there. The Deathwing does not require acknowledgement. It does not seek recognition. Its war is not waged for glory. Its duty is older than the Codex Astartes, older than Guilliman's reforms, older even than the heresy itself. It is the duty of the First Legion, and so they remain, the Knights of the Deathwing. When they walk, they do so with the weight of history on their shoulders. When they fight, they bring with them the fury of a chapter long misunderstood, and the resolve of warriors who will never, ever bend. They are not just the first into battle, they are the last to fall. And wherever the First Legion is remembered, the Deathwing will be its silent, unyielding heart. Before the Deathwing were ghostly figures in bone-white armor, before the Horus heresy cracked the Imperium's foundations, before even the name Dark Angels took root, they were simply warriors of the First Legion, the Emperor's firstborn, the tip of his spear in the unification of the galaxy. Yet within that vast and storied legion, the Deathwing had their genesis not as a name, but as a purpose, forged in a time when the structure of the Legions Astartes was fluid, experimental, and shaped by the hands of a newly discovered Primarch, Lion L. Johnson. When the Lion was found upon the feral world of Caliban, he brought with him not only martial brilliance, but the discipline of knightly tradition, oaths, orders, and secretive brotherhoods forged in the crucible of feudal warfare. The legion he inherited had already been shaped by old Earth's forge-tempered doctrines, drilled by Terran officers in the earliest days of the Great Crusade. But Johnson saw potential for more, for refinement, hierarchy, and internal specialization that transcended mere battlefield role. He brought to the First Legion a vision, the hexagrammaton. It was not a simple division of labor like the Codex Astartes would later impose. No, this was a philosophical and martial reformation, 6 distinct wings within the Legion, each built to embody a principle of warfare. The Deathwing was born as one of these 6, not yet the Terminator-clad executioners of later centuries, but an elite order of Astartes entrusted with the gravest tasks and most sacred duties. They were protectors of command, masters of annihilation, and guardians of the Legion's most vulnerable moments. Where lesser warriors faltered, the Deathwing stood. They were known by another name at first, the Host of Crowns. That title bore the weight of symbolism, for to wear the crown was not to rule, but to be marked for responsibility. The Host of Crowns stood vigil not over territory, but over people. The Legion's leadership, its symbols, and its secrets. They were the ones who shielded the Lion in battle, who executed the will of the inner circle without hesitation. They were not the largest wing, nor the most visible, but they were never absent where the stakes were highest. As the heresy brewed in silence and then burst into open betrayal, the role of the Deathwing, as they were now beginning to be called, evolved further. No longer was it enough to be guardians or specialists in execution strikes. Now the Legion found itself beset from all sides, trust fractured, its legacy called into question. The Deathwing responded not with defiance, but with a terrifying resolve. If the galaxy would fracture, they would not. If the stars burned, they would hold the line. It was during these bitter years that the seeds of their future secrecy were planted. The Hexagrammaton as a whole had always operated with a level of compartmentalization. The Dreadwing unleashed devastating chemical and rad weaponry. The Iron Wing were mechanized strength incarnate, the Raven Wing swift and elusive. But it was the Deathwing who bore the quiet burden of containment, both of the enemy and of the Legion's own fragility. Records from this era are fragmented, lost in warp storms, or sealed behind vaults that even the Inquisition cannot open. But what remains paints a picture of grim duty. The Deathwing were deployed to silence rogue elements within the Legion. They rooted out threats not only on the battlefield, but within the chain of command itself. And always they operated without fanfare. If a commander showed signs of weakness, it was the Deathwing who removed him. If a librarian's mind buckled beneath warp pressure, it was the Deathwing who stood over the body. Their blades did not discriminate between enemies and errant brothers. Only the mission mattered. As the heresy reached its zenith and the galaxy convulsed in civil war, the First Legion, like so many others, was pulled in multiple directions. Though loyal to the Emperor, they were often isolated, distrusted due to their own cryptic doctrines and internal secrecy. The Lion himself made decisions that baffled allies and even drew quiet suspicion. And in that atmosphere, the Hexagrammaton endured, but began to splinter. By the end of the heresy, only 2 wings remained intact in both purpose and identity, the Deathwing and the Raven Wing. The others had faded, merged, or been disbanded in the maelstrom of conflict. The host of crowns, however, had survived, now simply known as the Deathwing, their title hardened by war, their purpose absolute. They emerged from the crucible transformed, bearing scars not only of battle, but of knowledge, because the Lion had entrusted them, above all others, with truth. It is whispered in the inner sanctums of the Rock that even before Caliban's fall, even before Luther's betrayal erupted into open war, the Lion foresaw the need for silence, for control, for guardians who could carry the heaviest truths without flinching, and he found those guardians in the Deathwing. From that moment, their evolution accelerated. They began to operate apart from the rest of the Legion, answering only to the Primarch and his highest lieutenants. Rituals of initiation grew more elaborate. Access to certain data was tiered and controlled. Even their deployment codes changed, routed through encrypted channels and masked behind battlefront diversions. The Deathwing was no longer just a wing. It was becoming a cloistered order. Terminators of the Deathwing began to mark their armor in symbolic ways. Not yet the full bone white of later millennia, but panels painted with ivory, scrollwork engraved with sacred oaths. Some bore the winged sword icon with a broken blade, a sigil that did not yet have meaning to most, but carried grim foreshadowing. Every brother who joined the wing was required to renounce his past designations. Within the Deathwing there were no captains or lieutenants, only guardians. Rank dissolved into purpose. Then came the tragedy of Caliban, the schism, the destruction, the scattering of the fallen into the warp, and the loss of Lionel Johnson himself. In that instant, the Deathwing became something more than soldiers. They became keepers of legacy. They became the wardens of a secret war, one that would span millennia. But before all of that, Before the secrecy, the interrogations, the robes, the hunts through shattered worlds, there was the hexagrammaton, a structure born of the Lion's mind and the Legion's ambition. And at its core, the Deathwing, cold, unrelenting, and incorruptible. The blade held in reserve, the shield that guards against not just enemies, but against the Legion's own darkness. Today, few remember the full shape of the hexagrammaton. Most Imperial scholars know only fragments. But within the Deathwing, its ghost remains. Their organization, their methods, even their battlefield doctrine all carry the imprint of that sixfold philosophy. It is etched into the design of their reliquaries, woven into the oaths they recite before battle, reflected in the fact that while others fight for victory, the Deathwing fight for permanence, for continuity between what the First Legion was and what it must remain. Their origins are not an anecdote. They are the root from which all else grows. To understand the Deathwing is to understand that they did not rise to glory by chance or by accident of war. They were built deliberately with foresight and sacrifice by a Primarch who knew that one day the Emperor's most trusted sons would need watchers among themselves, and so they endure. From the host of crowns to the bone-armored executioners of the 42nd millennium, the Deathwing's foundation is older than most realize. It is the quiet truth behind their silence. Not tradition for tradition's sake, but memory etched into battle plate. For when all else falls, they remember what came before, and they remember why it must never happen again. There is a shadow that stretches across the legacy of the Dark Angels, not a silence of ignorance, but of deliberate, unbearable memory. To the Imperium, the chapter stands proud and unbroken, paragons of loyalty and discipline. But those who wear the bone white of the Deathwing carry something deeper than honor. They carry a wound that has never healed, a betrayal not from without, but from within, and its name is Caliban. Before it was torn apart by war and madness, Caliban was a place of dense forests, towering mountains, and beast-haunted wildlands. It was a world of myths and monsters, home to a knightly culture that valued discipline, obedience, and strength. The perfect crucible into which the Emperor's son, Lion L. Johnson, fell like a blade into the forge. Raised among Caliban's warrior orders, Johnson grew to manhood fighting horrors that stalked the deep woods and leading mortals in the defense of civilization. When the Emperor finally found his lost son, he bestowed upon him command of the First Legion. The Lion accepted, but he did not abandon his roots. Instead, he raised his closest Calibanite brothers alongside him. Men like Luther, his most trusted friend and mentor, were elevated to positions of authority within the Legion and its fortress monastery. Together, they brought order to Caliban and unity to the stars. At first, it seemed a perfect union. Terra and Caliban, gene-forged warrior and mortal knight, old world and new destiny. But perfection never lasts. As the Great Crusade ground on, Lion L. Johnson led his warriors far from Caliban, conquering and cleansing the stars in the name of the Emperor. In his absence, Luther remained behind, tasked with overseeing the homeworld, training new recruits, and managing the chapter's growth in his friend's name. But resentment, like rot in the roots of a tree, crept in slowly. Luther had once been the Lion's equal, his teacher, his confidant. Now he was left behind while his former pupil became a legend. Whispers stirred among the Calibanite recruits, fueled by pride, confusion, and darker things. The warp does not always blaze its corruption like a brand. Sometimes it tempts in the quiet, where doubt and ambition mix. Caliban had always been a place touched by mystery, the beasts of its wilds unnatural, the deep places haunted by more than just tales. And in time, a great schism began to fester among the Legion's sons. Many of Caliban's new Astartes came to believe that Terra had poisoned their home, that the lion had forgotten his people, that Luther, not the absent Primarch, was the true leader of their destiny. When Janssen returned at the very end of the Horus heresy, the rift had become a chasm. He arrived not to reunite, but to confront. What he found on Caliban was rebellion. Luther, emboldened by pride and corrupted by the subtle influences of chaos, had declared independence. Caliban's defenses had been fortified. The fortress monastery that had once trained loyal Astartes now bristled with guns aimed at the skies. When the Dark Angel's fleet entered orbit, they were met not with celebration, but fire. The final battle for Caliban was not fought against Xenos or traitor legions. It was fought brother against brother. What followed was apocalyptic. The skies above Caliban were torn with plasma and flame. The orbital bombardment from the Dark Angel's fleet battered the world's surface as loyalist and rebel forces clashed in the ruins of their once great brotherhood. In the heart of the storm, deep within the grand cathedral of the Order, Lionel Johnson confronted Luther. The accounts of what happened between them are conflicting, distorted by emotion, corrupted by secrecy, and buried beneath 10,000 years of silence. But this much is known. The two men who had once been as close as father and son fought in single combat. And in that duel, something shattered. Some say that Luther struck the final blow, that in a moment of grief, he realized the full horror of his betrayal and wept for what he had done. Others claim that the lion let the blow fall, not out of weakness, but because he could not bring himself to kill the man who had once saved his life as a child. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Luther was left broken and senseless, his mind shattered, muttering endlessly of regret and voices in the dark. As for the lion, he vanished. Some say he was mortally wounded and spirited away by mysterious figures cloaked in shadow. Others whisper that he entered stasis within the rock, his body sustained in secret by the chapter, awaiting a future that has not yet come. His fate is a mystery even to many within the Dark Angels, one they dare not speak of lightly. But the greatest tragedy was yet to be discovered. As the warp storm that had engulfed Caliban faded, the planet was found torn asunder. Only a fragment of the world remained intact, the largest piece of which would become known as the Rock, now a spacefaring fortress monastery of the chapter. The rest of the world had been obliterated, and those who had sided with Luther, once brothers, born of the same gene seed, trained in the same halls, had disappeared. They were not slain. They had been cast into the warp, scattered across time and space by the cataclysm of the battle and the dark powers that had fueled it. Thus were born the fallen angels, traitors of the First Legion, damned not by ignorance but by choice. This revelation changed everything. To the Imperium, the Dark Angels remained loyal. Records were cleansed, histories adjusted, silence enforced. The destruction of Caliban was blamed on warp turbulence, on civil unrest, on the lingering consequences of the heresy. But within the chapter, the truth was known. The betrayal of the fallen had left a stain that could not be erased, only atoned for. A silent war began, not sanctioned by the High Lords, not known by the Inquisition. A war waged in whispers, across stars and centuries. The Dark Angels swore an unbreakable oath to hunt down every last fallen, to bring them to justice, by capture or execution, and to do so without fail, without hesitation, and without compromise. And it was the Deathwing who took up this burden most heavily. Already the most trusted and elite warriors in the chapter, they were now entrusted with its deepest shame. They would become the hunters, the redeemers, the executioners. Their bone-white armor, once a symbol of valor, now became a mask, a reflection of their role as both avenger and mourner. They were the ones sent to recover the fallen when sightings were confirmed. They were the ones who secured prisoners in silence. They were the ones who bore the full weight of the Legion's sin. The fall of Caliban was not just the loss of a homeworld, it was the crucible in which the Deathwing was reforged. Every strike force since then, every campaign that veers suddenly from its goal, every unexplained withdrawal from a broader imperial conflict, all of it may trace its roots back to that moment when brothers became traitors and honor demanded that the truth never be spoken aloud. Even today, as the galaxy burns anew in the wake of the Great Rift, the Deathwing continues their hunt. Clad in ancient plate marked by silence and oaths, they walk among their brothers as both example and reminder. Each fallen they capture is brought back to the rock for judgment. Each success is another stone laid on the path toward redemption, and another cut across the soul. The fall of Caliban is not an event locked in the past. It is a wound that bleeds still, hidden beneath robes and ritual. For the Deathwing, it is not history, it is purpose, and they will not rest until the last shadow has been dragged into the light. There are truths within the Dark Angels chapter that are not spoken aloud, even among brothers. Words that, once heard, mark a man forever. Knowledge that rewrites everything he once believed. And at the heart of this cloistered mystery sits the inner circle, the secretive cabal who hold the keys to the chapter's shame and who orchestrate the eternal hunt for redemption. Among their ranks, the Deathwing stand apart. Not merely warriors, not only veterans, but sentinels of truth, guardians of the unspoken. For most Space Marines, the pathway of ascension is defined by deeds, honor on the battlefield, loyalty in command, zeal in service to the Emperor. But within the Dark Angels, another path runs parallel to that of military hierarchy, a path unseen by outsiders, one that leads not just to rank, but to revelation. A newly inducted Dark Angel begins as all Astartes do, as a neophyte, then as a battle brother, fighting in the green armored companies of the chapter. He may serve decades, even centuries, without suspecting that there is another reality beneath the visible one. He fights beside the Deathwing, sees their bone-white armor, hears their clipped orders, and knows only that they are the finest warriors of the chapter. But what he does not see, cannot yet see, is the fortress of secrets behind those helms. The inner circle is not a council of convenience or formality. It is a spiritual crucible. To be invited into it is to be transformed. And the gateway to that transformation is the Deathwing. It begins subtly. A veteran is selected for his resilience, his clarity of thought, his utter reliability under pressure. But more importantly, for his loyalty beyond doubt. Loyalty not only to the chapter or to the Emperor, but to something older, heavier, the ideals of the First Legion. Once chosen, the Astartes is offered entry into the Deathwing, and with it, a glimpse behind the curtain. But even then, the truth is not revealed all at once. The Deathwing is not a brotherhood of equals. It is a ladder of revelation, with each rung exposing deeper layers of truth and demanding greater burdens of secrecy. A new Deathwing Terminator learns only that they are entrusted with operations of the utmost sensitivity. They are told that the chapter has ancient enemies, heretics, and traitors of a particularly vile strain, and that their role is to hunt these foes across the galaxy. No names are given, no faces, just a mission, and an oath to ask no questions. But the deeper one ascends, the more that veil is lifted. Over time, through unwavering service and silent obedience, a Deathwing veteran may be permitted to learn the first and most shattering truth, that these hunted enemies were once Dark Angels themselves, that they are not merely traitors to the Imperium, but fallen angels, once brothers who turned on the Lion, who stood beside Luther during the betrayal of Caliban, and who now roam the stars as fragmented relics of a broken past. To hear this truth is to undergo a kind of death. The death of innocence. The death of certainty. Some cannot bear it. Though rare, there are recorded instances, carefully hidden in the rock's deepest vaults, of promising warriors who broke beneath the weight of this revelation. Men who, upon learning the truth of the fallen, wept in rage or fell into silence or were never seen on the battlefield again. In these cases, the chapter responds swiftly. The individual is removed from active service, often reassigned to meditative duties within the rock, or, in the most extreme circumstances, quietly erased from the rolls. Because once a warrior knows the truth, there is no going back. That is why the Deathwing's admission rituals are so stringent. Physical skill, mental resilience, unwavering composure. These are the minimum requirements. What is truly sought is spiritual anchorage. A brother who, upon being told that their chapter's history is not one of pure glory, but of betrayal and hidden sin, does not flinch, who accepts this knowledge not as a curse, but as a mandate, a calling to put things right. At the heart of the inner circle lie the interrogator chaplains, robed figures with crux skulls and croziuses, whose duties extend beyond faith and into the realms of judgment and truth extraction. It is they who oversee the rituals of promotion, they who decide how much a given Deathwing warrior is permitted to know, and when. They who maintain the structure of layered secrecy that protects the chapter's soul from unraveling. Because secrecy is not merely tradition, it is survival. Were the truth of the fallen, that a significant number of the First Legion turned traitor, not during the heresy but at its conclusion, ever to become public, the consequences would be devastating. The Dark Angel's status as a founding chapter could be stripped, their relics confiscated, their brothers branded heretic by association. In the eyes of the wider Imperium, loyalty is binary, and nuance has no place. And so the inner circle acts as a firewall. The Deathwing are its vanguard. Within the circle, knowledge is tiered. The lowest initiates may know only that the chapter hunts traitors. The mid-circle members learn that these traitors are of Caliban. Only the highest, the Grand Masters, Chief Librarians, and Interrogator Chaplains know the full tale. The betrayal of Luther, the scattering of the fallen into the warp, the disappearance of the Lion, and the true purpose of the rock. And yet, even amid such grim duty, there is brotherhood, a strange, profound kind. The Deathwing, in their silence, forge bonds not in boast or banter, but in understanding. When two Deathwing veterans look at one another across a chamber, there is no need to speak. Each knows what the other has seen. Each has stood in the aftermath of an interrogation, eyes fixed on a broken fallen angel, waiting for the last breath to escape, or for a single word of repentance. Each has walked battlefields not for glory, but for necessity, to capture, to judge, to silence. To be Deathwing is to be alone, even among comrades, yet never more bound to them. It is also to exist outside normal chains of command. A Deathwing squad may be deployed to a war zone where a full company is operating, yet act entirely on its own authority. Orders may come directly from the inner circle, bypassing captains and even the chapter master. Their missions may contradict larger strategic goals, but the Deathwing does not explain. They act, and then vanish. Other chapters find this insufferable. Some refuse to work with the Dark Angels at all. But the Deathwing accepts such disdain. It is the price of purpose. Those few who rise to the highest ranks of the inner circle are changed forever. Not physically, though the weight of decades in Terminator armor carves deep grooves into a warrior's frame. But spiritually, they become men of silence, men of burden. Many wear hoods over their helms, even in battle, not as decoration, but as shield, a symbolic defense against the eyes of the world. They are no longer men. They are symbols. They are watchers, not only of the enemy, but of their own. The process is irreversible. There is no leaving the inner circle, no retirement, no reassignment, no forgetting. Once a warrior has crossed the threshold, he remains there until death. And in death, he is remembered not by name, but by deed. His personal heraldry is absorbed into the Deathwing's broader legacy. His victories become fuel for others, his failures, lessons etched into the protocols of secrecy. To an outsider, it is madness, a labyrinth of lies and half-truths. But to the Deathwing, it is clarity. In a galaxy racked by treachery, heresy, and alien corruption, the Deathwing offers a purity of purpose. They are not distracted by politics or recognition or the petty rivalries of command. Their mission is simple: contain the truth, hunt the fallen, preserve the honor of the First Legion, no matter the cost. And so they remain, the guardians of the inner circle, the keepers of what cannot be spoken. They do not ask for trust, nor give it lightly. They do not seek understanding. They do not explain. They simply carry the burden, not because they must, but because no one else can. And in that silence, they find purpose. In that purpose, redemption. And in redemption, the hope that one day the lion will return. And when he does, he will find his sons ready. There is a silence that falls when the Deathwing arrive, not the hush of awe, nor the reverence of fear, but a deeper stillness, as if reality itself holds its breath in anticipation. For when these warriors descend, bone-white and unmoving, it is not just the thunder of war that follows. It is judgment, carried on the shoulders of ancient armor, sealed in the solemn weight of 1,000 unspoken oaths. And it begins, always, with the flash of teleportation and the gleam of bleached ceramite, a color that means only one thing: death has come wearing white. Where most chapters wear vibrant heraldry, the Dark Angels are famously restrained. Deep forest green for their battle companies, black for the Raven Wing, and for the Deathwing, white, bone white. A shade that should not belong on a battlefield, a color that catches the eye and gives no quarter to concealment. It is not camouflage, it is not ceremonial, it is a declaration. The Deathwing do not hide, they do not need to. The tale of their color is more than aesthetic. It is a story engraved into the history of the chapter, a legacy marked in both triumph and sacrifice. The Deathwing were not always bone white. In the early days, during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, the First Company wore the same black as the rest of the Legion. Their Terminator armor, rare and revered, was adorned with gold trim and Terran sigils. There were no flourishes, no outward sign of anything but grim efficiency. But that changed. Not because of a decree from Terra, not by the order of a Primarch, but because of a single act of defiance. It happened on a distant, feral world, known to some records as the Plains World, a recruiting world remote and largely forgotten by the Greater Imperium. Here, a Genestealer infestation had taken root, hidden in the folds of human superstition and tribal rites. A Deathwing squad was dispatched in response. Terminators, veterans, seasoned and uncompromising. They expected resistance. They did not expect to find their home, the very place from which many of them had been drawn as boys, enslaved. The people had been taken, their minds twisted by alien dominion. Their bodies offered to a growing Xenos cult, and the Deathwing saw what others might have ignored, not a strategic loss, but a personal betrayal. They did not retreat. They did not call for reinforcements. They made their choice. Knowing that death awaited them, they painted their armor white, the color of mourning, of sacrifice, and of finality in the tribal beliefs of their youth. It was an act not of despair, but of defiance. If they were to die, they would die remembered. They would die pure. What followed was a massacre, but not of the Deathwing. They fought with the fury of angels wronged. Room by room, tunnel by tunnel, they purged the infestation. Thunder hammers shattered bone and steel. Storm bolters stitched lines of fire through the darkness. They hunted the Brood Lord through temple ruins, through the catacombs beneath the plains, and when they found it, they brought it down, not with desperation, but with precision. One by one, some of them fell, but not all. Enough survived to bear witness. When the mission was done, when the infestation lay broken, the survivors returned to the rock, bloodied, changed, but alive. They carried not only victory, but meaning. Their white armor was no longer a tribute to the dead. It had become a symbol of defiant survival, and from that day forward, the Deathwing would never wear another color. But there is more to the white than just remembrance. In the Deathwing, every mark matters. The color of a shoulder trim, the hue of a helmet stripe, the number of purity seals draped over the gorget. Each tells a story. The bone white is not uniform. In the scorched lighting of a war zone, it may gleam like ivory or dull like ash. Some suits are pitted and scarred, the ceramides scorched from centuries of relentless campaigns. Others gleam with careful polish, their plates engraved with ancient high Gothic prayers and the lost runes of Caliban. There is no vanity in this, no pretense of showmanship. The Deathwing wear their armor as monks wear robes, not to draw the eye, but to remind themselves of purpose. Each suit is a relic. Passed from one generation to the next, it may be older than the warrior who wears it. Some plates bear the mark of the Horus heresy, forged in the forges of Mars before the traitor schism, reforged 100 times since. Each pauldron, each greave, has known the weight of a different brother's stride. When a Deathwing warrior is assigned his armor, he is not merely fitted. He is entrusted. The Tech Marines whisper litanies, the chaplains inscribe fresh oaths, and the librarians may scribe a psychic brand into the helm's interior, a fragment of memory to guide or guard. Functionally, the armor is tactical dreadnought plate, more commonly known as Terminator-armored. It is among the most powerful suits of personal protection in the Imperium. The ceramite is layered with adamantium, the servos powerful enough to bend steel, the auto senses capable of tracking dozens of targets simultaneously. Yet for all its strength, it is not easily worn. The Deathwing train for years to bear the full weight of it, not just physically, but mentally. In full plate, a warrior becomes something more than a man. His movement is slow, deliberate, but unstoppable. He becomes a walking fortress, a weapon turned inward only by the bearer's will. The sigils on the armor are no less important. The winged sword, the badge of the Dark Angels, is omnipresent, but the Deathwing version bears subtle differences. Often the blade is shown broken or wrapped in a shroud of barbed vines. Some warriors bear personal heraldry, a cracked bell, a blinded eye, a serpent devouring its own tail, each a symbol of penance, of oaths taken and never forgotten. These are not standard issue. They are earned. Some are given by the inner circle. Others are awarded after the capture of a fallen. Each one is sacred. And then there are the robes. To an outsider, they seem out of place, soft cloth draped over towering war machines. But to the Deathwing, the robes are as vital as the armor itself. They are a reminder of the monastic roots of the chapter, of the knightly orders of Caliban, of secrecy, of humility. Worn over the chest plate or beneath the gorget, the robe signifies not only service but understanding. Only those who have borne the truth, the full truth, are permitted to wear them. It is a visual code known only to the inner circle. When a Deathwing knight enters battle clad in his flowing robes and massive Terminator plate, there is no doubt in the minds of his enemies or allies. This is not simply a warrior. This is a relic of war made flesh. There is a paradox at the heart of the Deathwing's appearance. Their white armor shines with the purity of purpose, yet it cloaks the deepest shame. Their heraldry is resplendent, yet they fight in silence. They bear ancient weapons of terrible power, yet they strike with ritual precision. They do not boast because they have nothing to prove. They do not retreat because their armor does not allow it, and their oaths demand it even less. To see them on the battlefield is to see the First Legion unfiltered, not as the Imperium thinks it knows them, but as they truly are, proud, burdened, and unflinching. The color white is not innocence, not for them. It is the color of the tomb, the color of a vow taken in mourning, the color of warriors who go where others will not, and return not as victors, but as witnesses. Witnesses to a war that never ended. And so the bone-white ceramite gleams beneath fire and fury. In every war zone where the Deathwing walk, the same questions rise on the lips of allies and enemies alike. Why do they wear white? Why do they not speak? Why do they never fall back? The answers are not given, because the answers are written in paint older than history, in blood older than the heresy, and in silence deeper than the void. The Deathwing do not wear white to be seen. They wear it so they cannot be ignored. There are stories whispered among the Dark Angels that never make it into official records. Tales passed from veteran to initiate, not in great halls, but in silent corners, in the slow moments of weapon maintenance, or in the quiet breath before battle. They are not tales of glory, nor of conquest, but of conviction, of what it means to be Deathwing. And among all these stories, one stands above the rest. They call it the tale of two heads talking. It does not begin in a war zone. It begins on a world that should have been safe. The planet had no name recorded in Imperial cartography. It was a plains world, dry, wind-scoured, with ancient tribal traditions that predated any Imperial compliance. To the Mechanicum, it was unremarkable. To Administratum scribes, barely worth noting. But to the Dark Angels, it was sacred, because it was one of their own recruiting grounds, a world where generations of Astartes aspirants had been chosen. Boys raised on myths of storm warriors descending from the heavens, selected for strength of body and clarity of soul. Those few who passed the trials were taken to the rock, never to return. But the world remained, a symbol of what the chapter defended, a quiet echo of their origins. That silence was shattered. The message arrived encoded, routed through obscure channels. A distress signal buried in tribal ritual. It spoke of false gods beneath the ground, of the devourers of flesh walking in shadow. The chapter's librarians detected familiar patterns, the coded phrasing, the cadence of the signal. It was a warning, a genestealer cult. There was no hesitation. A strike force was assembled, not of green-armored tactical squads or Raven-wing outriders. This was Deathwing work. The veterans who deployed to the planet were not nameless. Among them was Ezekiel, known in his youth by a different name, Cloud Runner, one of the first aspirants taken from the Plains world in decades past. With him came warriors whose tribal names had long been buried beneath layers of identity. But for this mission, they chose to reclaim them. There was Weasel Fierce, known for his cunning, Bloody Moon, who had never once been wounded in battle, but bore the scars of every brother he'd lost, Silent Gale, whose bolt gun was said to fire as rhythmically as a storm drum, and Two Heads Talking, the Librarian, a man known for his paradoxical nature, serene in council, ruthless in war, These were not titles chosen in arrogance. They were names of home. Before deployment, the squad conducted an unusual rite. They painted their armor not in the polished bone white typical of the Deathwing, but in crude, chalky pigments, pure, sun-bleached white, the color of death in their native tradition. They did not expect to return. They called it a last hunt. They teleported directly into the heart of the infestation, an ancient temple that had once been used for tribal ceremonies, now desecrated into a breeding nest. The heat was oppressive. The air was thick with alien musk and incense. The structure trembled with whispered chants, echoes of the brood mind echoing through the stone. The Deathwing arrived as thunder, storm bolters blazing, blades humming with psychic fury. They moved not like a squad, but like an organism, perfectly synchronized, each warrior anticipating the movements of the next. They had fought together for decades. But here, in the halls of their origin, they fought as one soul split across many bodies. They descended through the temple layers, exterminating nests, purging hybrid masses, incinerating gene clerics mid-ritual. For every cultist slain, more emerged from the walls. But the Deathwing pressed on, deeper and deeper, toward the Broodlord. Two Heads Talking was the first to sense it. He described it later in fragmentary record as a silence behind the silence. A mind so alien, so ancient, that even his psychic gifts could barely touch it. The Broodlord waited in a sanctum beneath the earth, its thoughts oozing upward like fog, its will saturating the cult's every action. To reach it, they had to pass through a gallery of horrors, a place where the corpses of failed initiates, once tribal elders, had been reshaped into icons of worship. The betrayal struck the squad like a hammer. These were their people. These were the faces of old storytellers, of those who once blessed the selection of their kind to become angels of death. Now they hung in mockery, their bones gilded, their eyes replaced with insectoid lenses. The Deathwing paused, just for a heartbeat. Then they advanced. The final confrontation was brutal. The Broodlord was massive, its limbs coiled like steel cables, its talons bladed with psychic energy. It moved with unnatural speed, shrugging off wounds, twisting through impossible angles. It struck down Bloody Moon in the first exchange, eviscerating him with a scream that shattered the temple walls. But the Deathwing did not falter. Weasel Fierce harried its flanks, driving it back into the sanctum. Silent Gale took a wound across his chest plate and kept firing. Ezekiel, Cloud Runner, engaged in close combat, his power sword singing through the thick xenoflesh. And it was Two Heads Talking who, in the end, ended it. He did not kill the Broodlord with a bolt or a blade, but with a name. Channeling the psychic echoes of the planet, the tribal rites buried deep in its soul, he summoned the memories of the people who had once worshipped the stars. He unleashed a storm of ancestral grief and pride, a psychic backlash that ruptured the Broodlord's control over its cult, severed its connection to the hive mind for just long enough. Then Cloud Runner drove his blade into its brainstem. The silence that followed was not peace. It was mourning. The surviving Deathwing gathered their dead. They did not call for extraction. They remained behind, aiding the scattered tribes in rebuilding, reteaching old ways, watching for lingering Xeno's influence. They walked among their people not as gods, but as guardians returned from myth. Eventually, the chapter sent ships. An extraction force arrived to find Cloud Runner and his brothers in simple garb, living among the villagers, wearing no insignia. Their armor, the chalk-white suits, were stacked neatly in a cairn of stone, marked only with tribal sigils. When the Grand Master of the Deathwing, Gabriel, came to retrieve them, he did not issue reprimands. He did not question their actions. He simply bowed his head. When he returned to the rock, he issued a single command: let the armor remain white. forever. And so it did. The tale of two heads talking is not often told in full. It is too strange, too rooted in belief and memory. But among the Deathwing, it is holy. It is the moment where purpose became tradition, where color became creed, where the first company of the Dark Angels became something more than elite warriors, where they became reminders of what was lost, of what must be protected, and of what it means to be willing to die not for victory, but for home. Even now, when the Deathwing arrive on new worlds, bone-white and wordless, the echoes of that story follow them. And sometimes a young Astartes will ask, why do they wear white? And an older brother will reply, not with doctrine or data, but with a story about Cloudrunner, about a librarian with two names, about a squad who painted their armor for death and earned something greater. A legend, yes, but also a truth, one worn in bone, one remembered forever. The tale of two heads talking. For the warriors of the Deathwing, duty is not a command. It is a vow spoken once and carried forever. It is not glory they seek, nor recognition, nor even victory in the conventional sense. Their purpose runs deeper, older. It is a thread pulled from the unraveled tapestry of the Horus heresy, knotted in shame, and woven anew with each life they take and each secret they bury. To wear the bone-white armor of the Deathwing is not simply to wield the chapter's finest weapons, but to accept the burden of its greatest silence. That silence is not passive. It is not born of ignorance. It is an active decision, reaffirmed in every battle, every captured fallen, every life spared or ended in the name of redemption. Because within the Deathwing lies a dual identity. They are warriors, yes, but also judges, executioners, and seekers of atonement in a galaxy that offers none. To understand their honor is to understand that they do not fight the same war as the rest of the Imperium. Whereas other chapters of the Adeptus Astartes measure success by conquered strongholds or slain heretics, the Deathwing view each campaign through another lens. Did it bring them closer to the fallen? Did it help restore the tattered legacy of the First Legion? Did it add one more name to the ever-diminishing list of the unredeemed? If the answer is yes, the cost in blood, time, and trust is accepted without hesitation. This unwavering obligation is not a convenient tool. It often pulls the Deathwing away from battles where they are desperately needed. There are dozens of recorded cases, most redacted, others sealed entirely, where a Deathwing force abruptly withdrew from an engagement, seemingly in defiance of strategic logic. Some of these instances resulted in catastrophic losses for allied Imperial forces. The frustration among commanders was, and remains, palpable. But what those outside the inner circle do not see is what the Deathwing sees. The fleeting glimpse of a face in a traitor's ranks, the corrupted dialect of Caliban woven into a heretic's vox chatter, the unmistakable warp taint on a suit of ancient Mark VI power armor long thought lost. These signs, imperceptible to most, are not overlooked by the Deathwing. To them they are sirens, summoning the full weight of their pursuit. And when such a sign is confirmed, the mission changes instantly, because the hunt always takes precedence. In the eyes of the Deathwing, there is no greater heretic than the Fallen. Not the demon prince who corrupts a world, not the Xenos warlord who topples a bastion. The Fallen are more than traitors. They are a living wound, a mirror held up to the soul of the chapter. Proof that their brotherhood is not incorruptible, that even the sons of the Lion can fall. And so the Deathwing respond to each new lead with methodical precision. They do not broadcast their intentions. They do not explain their divergence. When orders change, they do not negotiate. The squad's teleporter beacons flicker, and moments later they are gone, replaced by silence and the scorched scent of ionized air. Their honor demands it, but this sense of honor is not recognized by all. Among other chapters, especially the more codex-adherent brethren, there is often tension. The Dark Angel's secrecy is notorious. Their refusal to share objectives, their abrupt departures, their stone-faced silence under questioning, it invites suspicion. Even the Inquisition, normally the arbiter of truth and compliance within the Imperium, finds the Deathwing difficult to parse. They follow orders when convenient. They vanish when it suits their purpose. There have been attempts, rare and often regrettable, to confront the Deathwing over these actions. One particularly well-documented event occurred during the purging of Orna Secundus. A combined Imperial force, including detachments of the Death Watch and the Nova Marines, engaged a heretic uprising. Midway through the campaign, the Deathwing diverted an entire Terminator strike force to an unrelated structure deep within a derelict hive city. The Nova Marines, unbriefed and unconsulted, sent a message of protest. The Deathwing did not reply. 3 days later, that hive was purged entirely. Inside its crypts, the Deathwing had uncovered a covert sanctuary where a fallen angel, posing as a chaos preacher, had amassed forbidden knowledge from the days of the heresy. The records were incinerated. The heretic was taken, bound, and vanished into the rock. The Nova Marines never received an explanation, but that, too, is the cost of honor. The Deathwing do not justify, they endure. Internally, within the Dark Angels and their unforgiven successor chapters, this behavior is not only accepted, it is expected. A Deathwing warrior is trained to prioritize the hunt above all. They are conditioned to understand that their duty is not to the campaign, the theater, or even the war itself, but to a promise made 10,000 years ago, a promise to the Lion, a promise that they, the loyal, would atone for the betrayal of their kin. It is a promise without end, and yet, in that endless duty they find a strange peace. The Deathwing do not argue over promotions. They do not seek commendations or accolades. The outside world's metrics of success are irrelevant. Their reward is the mission itself. To be permitted to wear the bone-white plate is reward enough. To be trusted with the chapter's hidden war, an honor beyond titles. It is a priesthood of war, defined not by ceremony, but by relentless pursuit. Each fallen they recover is an act of liturgy. Each interrogation, a trial of faith. Every success brings them closer, not to absolution, for they do not believe they deserve that, but to balance, to a galaxy in which the ledger of betrayal might one day be evened. But not all missions end in capture. There are some fallen who resist to the end, whose madness or bitterness has festered too deeply. In these cases, the Deathwing do not flinch. They execute, not with hatred, not with vengeance, but with grieving necessity. In death, some of the fallen whisper regrets. Others curse the Emperor. A few, very few, repent, weeping in their final breaths for the sin they cannot undo. For those rare few, the Deathwing offer something they offer no one else: silence. Their names are removed from the hunt, their deeds sealed, their remains entombed within the rock. And for those who repent, the interrogator chaplains conduct the last rites in absolute secrecy, chanting the ancient prayers of Caliban beneath the fortress's deepest catacombs. Because honor to the Deathwing is not about what others see, it is about what they remember. Each warrior carries a personal oath scroll affixed to their belt or bolted to their shoulder guard. These scrolls contain no names, no ranks, only a single phrase repeated in variations. Where one has fallen, one shall rise to carry the burden. The phrase is written in High Gothic, Calibanite, and in some cases in coded script. It is the creed of the Deathwing, their anchor, their condemnation, and their absolution, if it ever comes, will not be granted by the Imperium nor the Emperor himself, but by the act of fulfilling that oath in its entirety. Until then, the hunt continues. The obligation remains. They will fight alongside allies they cannot trust. They will battle foes who mirror their own past. They will pursue the fallen not just across space, but across centuries, from jungle moons to dying hive cities, from demon worlds to desolate asteroid sanctuaries. There is no place too remote, no enemy too cunning, no cost too great, because the Deathwing understand what few others do. Redemption is not a moment, it is a path, and they walk it clad in bone white, step after relentless step. There is no retreat, not when the line buckles, not when the numbers swell beyond counting, not when the sky is ablaze and the ground boils with enemy blood. The Deathwing do not retreat. They advance, or they stand. And when they stand, the ground beneath their boots becomes sacred, for it will not be given up, not by oath, not by force, not by death. To the Imperium, the Deathwing are elite Terminators, specialists, siege breakers. But those who have seen them fight, truly seen them, know that these bone-armored veterans are not mere weapons of war. They are monuments to persistence, beings forged from unyielding purpose, bred not just to kill but to endure. Their victories are not always measured in bodies, but in the ground they hold and the moments they buy. In those seconds where entire battlefields pivot around their refusal to yield. Their armor makes them formidable, but their will makes them immovable. Where others draw strategy maps and contingency plans, the Deathwing draw lines in the dirt, lines they will not cross and will not abandon. It is not pride, it is not arrogance, it is a code written into the history of their brotherhood, a reflection of the First Legion's old ways. If the enemy must be stopped, then we shall be the wall. There are stories, hundreds, perhaps thousands, tales recounted in the shadowed halls of the Rock, shared between Deathwing veterans in quiet tones, not out of boastfulness but reverence. Each tale is different, a different planet, a different enemy, a different war. But the theme never changes. They did not break. One such tale comes from the scorched world of Varnak's Hollow, a barren, dust-choked ruin on the edge of the Segmentum Obscurus. It had no tactical value, at least not at first glance. But within its crusted mountains lay a cryptic facility from the dark age of technology. The Orcs discovered it. Then the Deathwing did. The first squads arrived with little fanfare, no declarations, no heralds, just a silent drop, bone-armored giants stepping from storm-ravaged skies. The Orc horde numbered in the tens of thousands, and the Deathwing, 18. They held for 4 days. By the end of the third, ammunition was being rationed. Bolts fired in controlled bursts, storm shields battered from crude artillery, ceramite scorched and cracked. Yet still they stood, backs to the facility doors, blades drawn, facing down wave after wave of green-skinned fury. When the third company of the chapter finally arrived in full strength, the enemy line broke. Not because of new firepower, but because the Orcs saw that the first wall had never fallen. 18 warriors, not one step back, not a single breach. Another story is whispered of the siege of Derek's Prime, a hive world under invasion by the traitorous word-bearers. The enemy had breached the walls, twisted cults rising from the depths, demons slithering through vents and sewers. The 5th Company of the Dark Angels was stretched thin, reinforcement days away. The final bastion was a cathedral fortress built into the spire's bones, a place of pilgrimage and relics, but tactically useless. To the Deathwing it was not. A single squad was dispatched. They teleported into the catacombs beneath the cathedral, sealed the entrances with promethium fire, and held. The word-bearers, sensing the value of the place, or perhaps merely insulted by resistance, launched assault after assault. The Deathwing did not respond with grand speeches. They responded with layered fire, deliberate kill zones, and the kind of close-quarters violence that leaves no room for demonic theatrics. When the cathedral was finally liberated, the walls bore no banners, only bolt casings, shell craters, and blood. And in the center stood 6 bone-armored figures, silent as statues. Every relic within had been preserved, every cultist slain, every inch defended. The people of Derek's Prime erected a monument outside that cathedral, not to victory, not even to survival, but to resolve. This is what it means to be unyielding in battle. The Deathwing do not charge recklessly. They are not berserkers. Their advance is measured, relentless. Every step forward is a calculation of purpose. Every stand taken is a promise. We will not abandon this ground. And their equipment reflects this. Terminator armor is heavy, nearly impenetrable, slow to move, but it is made for one thing: endurance under fire. A Deathwing Terminator, locked into his warplate, becomes a walking bulwark. He does not require cover. He is the cover. Storm bolters affixed to the wrist allow for firing while advancing or blocking. Power fists and chain fists ensure no door, no barricade, and no enemy will remain intact for long. Then there are the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield pairs, wielded by some of the most unbreakable warriors in the wing. These combinations turn Deathwing squads into phalanxes of force, able to absorb punishment that would obliterate even other Astartes. When such a formation holds a corridor, there is no moving them. They become a plug in the bleeding artery of the battlefield. And yet, it's not the armor or the weapon that turns the tide. It's the mentality. Deathwing veterans are trained for one very specific mindset: hold until the mission is complete. And in their context, the mission is not always tactical. Sometimes it is spiritual, symbolic. Sometimes the objective is to prevent the chapter's secrets from falling into the wrong hands. Sometimes it is to delay a demon until the interrogator chaplain finishes his rite. Sometimes it is simply to buy 30 more seconds. They understand this. They accept this. They live for this. Some call them inflexible, too stubborn. Others, especially among Codex-compliant chapters, whisper that the Deathwing's unwillingness to retreat borders on fanaticism. But what these critics fail to grasp is that the Deathwing's resolve is not born of self-righteousness. It is born of necessity. Because they know what it is to fail. They carry the memory of Caliban's fall. They carry the knowledge of the fallen. They understand what happens when ground is given, when faith wavers, when brothers turn. And so they do not bend, they do not give ground, because every inch lost is a reminder of a deeper betrayal. Every step back is a ghost from the past whispering, "You are doing it again." To fail in battle is one thing. To allow the sins of the past to repeat, unforgivable. This is why the Deathwing stand where others fall, not because they believe they are invincible, but because they believe they must be. In the archives of the Rock, there is a phrase engraved above the arming chambers of the Deathwing. Where we fall, there is no one left to rise. It is not motivational. It is factual. The Deathwing are the end of the line, the last door before the abyss, and so in a universe devoured by war, treachery, and madness, they stand, clad in white, backed by silence, wreathed in fire, and they do not break, because if they did, the galaxy would fall with them. There are secrets within the Dark Angels chapter, so terrible, so foundational, that they are spoken only in darkness, in tongues forgotten by all but the oldest librarians, whispered through locked doors beneath the rock. These are not strategic truths, nor forbidden technologies. They are not demonic bargains or Xenos pacts. No, these secrets are older than the Codex Astartes, older than the Imperium as it is now known. They are the truth of the fallen. And those who carry this knowledge do not wear laurels or sit upon command thrones. They wear bone-white armor and walk without fanfare. They are called the Deathwing, but within their brotherhood exists a narrower tier, an even more sacred obligation. They are the guardians of the inner circle. To the outside world, even to most within the Dark Angels themselves, the inner circle is a myth, a term muttered with reverence, often used to describe the highest echelons of chapter command. But that is a simplification, and a dangerous one. The inner circle is not a military body. It is a custodial order, a sacred priesthood, an unbroken chain of trust that reaches back to the Lion himself. Only a select few within the chapter are ever inducted, and when they are, it is not with celebration. It is with silence, blood, and binding oaths that will follow them to death and beyond. To become a guardian of the inner circle is to trade comfort for burden, clarity for concealment. It is to hold the darkest truths of the chapter close to your chest while wearing the expression of a silent warrior. It is to know, and most who know do not survive unchanged. The Deathwing holds many of these guardians in its ranks, not just because they are veterans, but because they are trusted by tradition, by lineage, by action. They have proven, through decades of relentless service and spiritual fortitude, that they are capable of bearing the weight of the truth without letting it crush them. Many take this burden to their graves without uttering a single word, and the truth is this: not all of the Dark Angels remained loyal during the heresy. Some betrayed the Lion, some embraced the warp, some fled, and some still live. This is the sin of the Dark Angels. This is the shame that makes them different. Where other loyalist chapters boast of unbroken faith and victories untainted, the Dark Angels whisper of deeds undone, of oaths betrayed, and of brothers lost not just to death, but to damnation. And it is the inner circle that bears the torch of this shame. They do not seek to destroy it. They seek to redeem it. And for that, they need guardians, eyes in the field, warriors who can act on whispers, strike without warning, hunt across centuries. That is the role the Deathwing fulfills, executioners and protectors both. When a trace of a fallen appears, when warp signatures match long-lost gene seed patterns, or a name from the past resurfaces in a Chaos Fleet manifest, the inner circle is convened. These gatherings are not military councils. They are cloistered rites, held beneath layers of fortress monastery, beneath the ossified remains of Caliban's shattered core. Here, the Grand Masters of the Inner Circle commune, and here they decide who will carry out the mission. Always it is the Deathwing. They are summoned in silence, no briefing, no record, only coordinates. Sometimes not even that, just a code phrase uttered by a chaplain in passing that triggers the beginning of a hunt. And when they move, they do so with knowledge far greater than those around them. They know what they're looking for. They know what must be done if they find it. This secret duty seeps into every facet of their existence. It informs their training, their combat doctrine, their refusal to speak openly around other imperial forces. Their silence is not arrogance. It is a defensive shield, not to protect themselves, but to protect the chapter's soul from shattering. Because if the truth of the fallen were to spread, if the Imperium were to learn that the First Legion fractured from within, the consequences would be apocalyptic. Not simply in prestige, but in trust. Entire crusades have turned on lesser heresies. Whole chapters have been excommunicated for lesser sins. The Deathwing understand this. They do not merely guard relics or battlegrounds. They guard the very idea of the Dark Angel's purity. That burden cannot be shared. Even the most faithful among other chapters would not understand. The Codex Astartes has no passage for this level of betrayal. The Inquisition would not tolerate it, and so the Deathwing's silence becomes a fortress unto itself. The Guardians do not confide, they do not explain, they act. There is a ritual older than any living Astartes, conducted in the lowest halls of the Rock. It is known only as the Vigil of Remembrance. A Deathwing warrior, upon being invited to the inner circle, undergoes it alone. No chaplain presides, no librarian monitors his mind. He is given a single blade, not a combat weapon, but a ceremonial dagger. In the darkness he is shown the faces of the fallen. Not all of them, but enough. He is told their names, their crimes, and then he must carve their names into the walls himself, one by one. It takes hours, sometimes days. When he is finished, he is a guardian. He does not sleep as he once did. He does not laugh, even among brothers. His perspective changes. Every enemy he faces is weighed against the memory of the true enemy, the traitors that were once kin. And in every bolt round fired, in every blade drawn, there is a secondary mission beneath the surface. This is practice. This is preparation. For when he finds one of the fallen, he will need to be ready, not just to kill, but to understand, to see in that traitor a mirror, and to face it without breaking. Some Deathwing veterans spend centuries in this dual state, honored warriors on the outside, haunted guardians within. Others fall to despair. Some go mad, whispering oaths to walls that do not answer. Fewer still question the mission altogether, and those few are dealt with swiftly and without record. Because the inner circle is not a democracy, it is a covenant, and the Deathwing as its guardians are bound by it more fully than any title or command could ever bind them. And yet, for all this secrecy and sorrow, they do not consider themselves cursed. Because the Deathwing do not hunt out of hate, they do not kill the fallen for vengeance. They do so because they believe, truly believe, that redemption is possible. Not for the traitors they kill, but for the chapter itself. Every fallen captured is a brick in the bridge back to the Lion's honor. Every whispered confession, a light in the darkness. Every slain betrayer, a chain broken. They fight not only to keep the Imperium safe, they fight to earn their right to call themselves sons of the First Legion. That is why the Guardians endure, why they bear the silence, why they sacrifice not just their lives but their peace of mind. Because someone must remember, someone must watch the shadows, and someone must stand between truth and annihilation. So when the Deathwing go to war, when they emerge from teleportation storms, white-armored and wordless, know this: they are not just there to fight, they are there to protect something far more fragile than flesh. The soul of a legion, and the secret that could dam it. To those who witness the Deathwing on the battlefield, the impression is immediate and unmistakable. They are giants in bone-white Terminator plate, marked by purity seals, winged swords, and ancient runes of a lost world. But these symbols are not simply aesthetic. Every etching, every sigil, every scrap of parchment pinned to their ceramite hides tells a story. One written not in ink alone, but in blood, shame, and unyielding devotion. The Deathwing are more than warriors. They are living relics, and their armor is their scripture. Unlike the Codex-compliant chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, the Dark Angels, and especially the Deathwing, diverge from Roboute Guilliman's rigid prescriptions. Where the Codex mandates clarity and standardization, the Deathwing wrap themselves in layers of symbolism that obscure far more than they reveal. This is not a lapse in discipline, it is an act of preservation, because their rituals and iconography are how they carry their burden and hide it from those not yet ready to see. It begins with the bone white of their armor. This in itself is a symbol. In the tribal traditions of pre-imperial Caliban, white was the color of death, of final oaths and sacred passage. Warriors donned it only when embarking on hunts from which they did not expect to return. It is a tradition first revived during the now legendary engagement against the Genestealer cult, where the Deathwing painted their Terminator suits white in an act of defiance and cultural memory. That tale has been passed down through the inner circle ever since. Today, the Deathwing wear that bone white always, not because they expect to die, but because they acknowledge they are already condemned to carry the sins of their legion. They do not seek survival. They seek redemption. Their armor reflects this, not the color of life, but the hue of remembrance. Upon this white canvas are drawn a multitude of symbols, each steeped in history. The most prominent is the winged sword, a relic of Caliban's knightly orders, and a symbol of the First Legion's duality. The blade represents truth and vengeance, cutting through lies and heresy. The wings, bound to its hilt, symbolize higher purpose and the purity of the Emperor's vision. Yet even this symbol carries hidden weight. The sword often points downward, suggesting penance rather than triumph. Many Deathwing bear scripture strips, also called votive parchments or oath seals. These are inscribed with passages from the Book of Salvation, the personal oaths of the bearer, or transcribed fragments of confessions taken from captured fallen. When affixed to their armor with wax seals, these scrolls do not simply decorate, they remind. A Deathwing warrior before battle may read his own oath aloud, reaffirming his commitment not to victory, but to justice, to secrecy, and to the ancient debt owed by the Sons of the Lion. Some warriors wear the icon of the broken blade, a mark reserved for those who have personally brought a fallen into custody, or executed one after failed redemption. This icon, rarely granted, is never spoken of aloud even within the chapter. It is a thing of somber respect, etched discreetly onto the inner shoulder pauldron or beneath the breastplate. It signifies not honor in the traditional sense, but the gravity of having faced one's own brother and passed judgment. Rituals accompany every piece of this iconography. The arming of a Deathwing warrior is not a practical affair. It is a rite of memory. Before donning his armor, each veteran enters solitude. There, in a chamber adorned with candles and relics, he performs the Vigil of Bones. During this rite, he recites the Litany of Repentance, a prayer not to the Emperor, but to the chapter itself. A prayer that asks forgiveness, not for his own sins, but for the sins of the fallen. Then comes the binding of the sigils. Armor components are laid out in sacred order, not from foot to head, but from heart outward. The chest plate is blessed first, with oils mixed from Calibanite flora, preserved for millennia in the rock's deep vaults. As each piece is affixed, an interrogator chaplain reads a segment from the Lion's journey through the forests of old. It is a long process, conducted in silence, and any deviation is considered both a personal failure and a spiritual fracture. In their pre-battle preparation, the Deathwing also participate in the lamentation of names. This solemn ritual involves the silent recitation of one or more names from the list of the fallen, each warrior having memorized a portion of the list upon induction to the inner circle. It is not a chant, but a personal act. The names are mouthed silently, their weight carried anew into battle. The purpose is simple, to remind the bearer that the real enemy is not always the foe across the battlefield, but the brother who fled into shadow. Not all iconography is visible to the naked eye. Beneath the outer plate of many Deathwing suits lies an inner seal, a black ribbon woven through the understructure of the ceramite. It is not mentioned in the Codex. It is known only as the Strand of Atonement and is installed in secret by the chapter's artificers. No two strands are alike. Each bears a single word etched in microscript, a word known only to the bearer and the chaplain who administered the rite. That word may be shame, it may be brother, it may be a name. It is never explained, and when the bearer dies, the word dies with him. On their left pauldron, some warriors of the Deathwing have begun to carve a sigil shaped like a shattered halo, a relatively recent addition seen more often since the opening of the Great Rift. It represents not a loss of faith, but a crisis of meaning, a recognition that even the most sacred symbols, like the Emperor's own halo, can fracture under pressure. It is a quiet declaration that the Deathwing will stand even when light fades. And then, of course, there is the most sacred ritual of all. The circle closed. This rite is not performed for the living. It is reserved only for those Deathwing who fall in the line of duty while pursuing the fallen. When such a warrior's body is recovered, it is brought to a hidden chamber within the rock known as the Sepulchre of Oaths. There, beneath the ever-burning flame of the First Legion, the brother's armor is dismantled piece by piece, and his oaths, every one he swore since induction, are recited backward, symbolically returning them to the soil of Caliban. If the warrior succeeded in bringing a fallen to justice before death, a sliver of his armor is melted down and used in the forging of a truth blade, a weapon used by interrogator chaplains in their sacred duties. In this way, the fallen guardian lives on, not as a name in a tome, but as a blade in the hunt. This is the essence of Deathwing iconography and ritual. To outsiders, it appears excessive, obscurantist, even heretical in its disregard for standard doctrine. But to the Deathwing, every mark and rite is necessary. They do not wear these symbols to glorify themselves. They wear them because without them, the weight would be too much. The sins of their legion are invisible, the shame unspoken. But the rituals, the icons, they are anchors, something tangible to grasp in a sea of silence. So the next time you see a Deathwing Terminator stride across a battlefield, look beyond the bolt gun, beyond the polished skulls and purity seals. Look at the sword carved into his chest, the scrolls clinging to his leg, the red wax dripping like blood. Know that every mark is a memory, every rite a whisper, every whisper a name, and every name a shadow they've sworn to chase, until the hunt ends, or they do. Names echo through the fortress monastery known as the Rock, like the slow toll of a funeral bell. Not names of glory-hungry champions or parade ground heroes, but of warriors whose silence screamed louder than any battle cry. The Deathwing has produced many such figures, icons etched not into monuments or marble, but into the very fiber of the chapter's soul. These are the heroes who bore the burden of secrecy, who walked into the darkest fires and emerged either tempered or ash. To speak of them is rare. Their legends are not shouted from ramparts. They are recounted in candlelit chapels, behind closed blast doors, whispered from one bone-armored warrior to another. Some tales are known only to the inner circle. Others have bled into myth. But all share a single thread. These were not just warriors, they were Deathwing. We begin, as we must, with Master Belial. There are few living warriors who exemplify the Deathwing's stoic fury as Belial does. He is not a relic of the past, he is a weapon wielded by the present. As Grand Master of the Deathwing, Belial commands the entire First Company, a brotherhood of battle-scarred veterans who would walk into the Eye of Terror itself at his word. But command was never what Belial sought. He earned it by enduring, by doing what others could not, by surviving campaigns where survival was not an option. His early rise began during the infamous Sorrowfall campaign, when a coalition of traitor Astartes, under the banner of the Scourged, laid siege to a shrine world on the edge of the Maelstrom. While the main chapter forces battled across hive cities and catacombs, Belial and a Deathwing strike force teleported directly into the enemy's stronghold. They were outnumbered 5-1, cut off by warp storms, with no reinforcements incoming. Belial did not falter. He held the spire for 6 days, his storm bolter roaring through dust-choked corridors, his power sword cutting through both flesh and heresy. When the psychic storm finally cleared, orbital scans revealed only one heat signature remaining. It was Belial standing atop a mound of dead, bloodied but unbowed, still guarding the altar the traitors had sought to defile. That is how his legend began. But what defines Belial is not just his prowess, it is his restraint. He does not seek vengeance blindly. He does not act without thought. He is a warrior forged in the crucible of necessity, not a crusader, but a judge. And when he speaks, every Deathwing warrior listens. Yet Belial is far from the only name whispered with reverence. There was Sergeant Naaman, whose name endures not for titles or command, but for sacrifice. Naaman was a scout once, a pathfinder whose quiet instincts marked him for something more. Elevated swiftly into the Deathwing for both skill and loyalty, Naaman carried with him a sharp tactical mind and a heart attuned to more than just bloodshed. During the fall of Gathalamor, an ancient ecclesiarchy bastion world invaded by Alpha Legion warbands and cult insurgents, Naaman led a Deathwing squad into the depths of the Basilica Precinctum. Their mission: to locate a relic containing encoded information about one of the fallen who had embedded himself within the local clergy. The mission went wrong. Their teleport insertion scrambled by arcane interference. Naaman and his squad materialized deep within a void-shielded vault, surrounded. Communications severed. Escape impossible. Naaman ordered his squad to break through the vault doors while he held the cult forces at bay, alone. For 17 minutes, his bone-white armor stood between the heretic tide and the secrets of the chapter. When his squad returned, they found only pieces of his shattered stormbolter and 100 corpses in a circle around the relic. Naaman died without fanfare, but within the rock, one of the inner sanctum vaults bears his name, engraved not in gold but in obsidian. It reads, "He stood when none could. He fell so we would not." Another figure, known only as Brother Interrogator Cariel, lived a life bound in silence. Cariel was a librarian of no particular renown, not a force commander, not a slayer of titans. But he possessed a rare talent, the ability to draw the fallen from their madness. Where others failed with blade or fire, Cariel used understanding, memory, even fragments of shared brotherhood to bring the fallen to confession. It is said Cariel succeeded in retrieving 9 confessions from known traitors, 9 names scratched from the hunt, 9 souls whose sins were at least acknowledged before death. No other interrogator in the chapter's long history has matched that number, but it cost him dearly. With each confession drawn, Cariel seemed to wither. His armor remained imposing, but his eyes dulled. His voice became quieter. He rarely left the lowest cells of the rock, spending days in meditation between each interrogation. He died during the siege of Drakemore, not in battle, but in the cell of a captured fallen who had once served beside him on Caliban. Witnesses said no scream was heard, only a single thunderclap, and then silence. Cariel's remains were never recovered. The captive vanished. The rock entered 3 days of ritual mourning, and a statue of a bowed librarian was raised in the inner sanctum, eyes closed, lips sealed. The inscription reads, "He listened so others could speak. He understood so others could endure." And then there is the story of Apothecary Aureus, the bone-white ghost of the reaping of Etros VII. Etros was a dying world, its air turned to ash, its sun devoured by a warp storm. Yet from its depths came an echo, a signal bearing the name of a fallen angel, long thought lost. Orias was among the Deathwing dispatched to investigate. He did not lead, he did not speak. He simply watched, analyzed, and prepared. When the squad was ambushed by a corrupted warband, it was Orias who identified the toxin lacing the air, a demon-infused chemical that eroded sanity. As his brothers began to falter, Orias acted alone. He vented his suit into vacuum, rendering himself immune to the airborne effect. He fought bare within the failing ruins of Etros, battling not just cultists, but the psychic backlash of the warp-infected storm. He extracted the gene seed from every fallen brother, carried their oaths encoded into vox beads, and detonated the cathedral to prevent the fallen from claiming any relics. When he returned, his armor was scarred black, his left eye gone, and his voice forever broken. But he had saved what mattered, the honor of the dead. Orias never returned to battle. He served still within the rock, tending the remains of his brothers, etching their last words into stasis plaques. A living reminder that duty doesn't end when the bolter falls silent. These are only a few names. There are more, many more, known only within the Deathwing's crypt vaults and memory scrolls. Their stories are not told for entertainment. They are taught, passed from veteran to neophyte, from Grand Master to humble shield-bearer. They are lessons in silence, courage, and the kind of honor. There are wars that end with a final shot. Victories marked by flags raised over shattered citadels. Campaigns sealed in ink and laurel on golden scrolls. And then there are the other wars, the ones that do not end because they cannot. The ones so wrapped in silence and shame that even the victors dare not speak of them. For the Deathwing, there is only one such war, the hunt for the fallen, the hunt eternal. To understand the operations of the Deathwing against the fallen, one must first understand that this is not a mission. It is an inheritance, passed from the lion to his sons, from the first generation of the First Legion to the last living guardian. It is not carried out with pomp or parade. It is done in silence, shadow, and fire, and it is never truly done. The fallen are those dark angels who turned traitor during the dark days of the Horus Heresy, a secret known to only the inner circle and the most trusted members of the Deathwing, cast into the warp when Caliban was torn apart, scattered across time and space. These former brethren are ghosts made flesh. Some are mad, others cunning. A few even claim innocence. But to the Deathwing there is no question of guilt, only a question of where they are and how quickly they can be captured or destroyed. The hunt eternal is the single most sacred and secretive duty of the Deathwing. Every operation against the fallen is carried out under absolute silence. Not even most dark angels know its full scope. Those few who ask too many questions are quietly redirected, or, when necessary, removed. The hunt cannot be compromised. The truth cannot be allowed to escape, not just because of the shame it would bring to the chapter, but because the very survival of the First Legion's legacy depends on it. Each hunt begins with a trace, a fragment of data intercepted from a rogue trader's Vox log, a corrupted astropathic signal, a recovered name whispered by a dying heretic. The librarians of the Dark Angels sift through this mountain of noise with religious intensity, searching for anomalies that might hint at the presence of one of the fallen. When a potential lead is found, it is not broadcast. It is carried, physically and in secret, by a black-robed chaplain to the Grand Masters of the Inner Circle, and then the Deathwing is summoned. They do not receive a campaign dossier. They do not ask questions. They do not argue. A single code phrase is spoken, and they mobilize. Some leave from battlefields, mid-deployment, without so much as a signal. Others are awoken from stasis or pulled from long patrols. Their orders are always the same: find the target, judge him, and if possible, bring him home. But bringing one of the fallen in alive is not a task for the faint-hearted. These are not merely rogue Marines. They are ancient, cunning warriors, often empowered by warp entities or commanding heretic cults. They have hidden for 10,000 years. Many are no longer even recognizable as space marines. Some have built their own empires, wormed their way into inquisitorial retinues, or disguised themselves as loyal servants of the Imperium. And yet, the Deathwing find them. How, no one can fully say. Their methods are opaque even to most within the Dark Angels. What is known is that each operation is carried out with surgical precision and absolute finality. The Deathwing do not ask permission to deploy. They do not inform local commanders. They appear where they must, strike as needed, and vanish like ghosts. Sometimes the Fallen is cornered in a spire of a hive city, commanding a rebellion. Sometimes he is disguised as a lowly preacher on a frontier shrine world, whispering treachery from behind stained glass. Sometimes, horrifyingly, he does not even know what he is. His memory broken, his past lost. But it matters not. Once confirmed, the Deathwing close in. And when they strike, it is not a battle. It is an execution of purpose. One such operation, known only as Ash Silence, took place on the mining world of Dervan's Hollow. A string of mysterious disappearances led a local astropath to request inquisitorial review. Before that review could begin, the Deathwing arrived. Without clearance, without warning. They teleported directly into the mountain spires of the sector capital, eliminated a dozen guardsmen who attempted to halt them, and proceeded to the central data core. Within 6 hours, the central reactor was detonated. The official report reads, containment breach, reactor instability, environmental hazard. No mention of the Fallen, who had embedded himself within the planetary command structure for 80 years. No mention of the sealed coffin transported silently back to the rock. The Imperium turned the page. The Deathwing did not. In another known as the Song of Ruin, a choir of astropaths across the Cadian Gate were found singing an identical forbidden liturgy, each claiming it came to them in dreams. The melody led the librarians of the Dark Angels to suspect the presence of a psyker among the Fallen. The Deathwing dispatched a single squad led by a Deathwing knight named Havel. They traced the psychic echo to an orbital station posing as a pilgrim hospice. When the station was boarded, the echoes of bolter fire were the only warning. The silence that followed was deafening. It is said that Havel himself carried the body of the psyker Fallen back to the rock. Not because he wished to, but because the soul needed to be judged. Not just the flesh. These operations rarely leave witnesses, and when they do, those witnesses are either inducted or eliminated. No warbands remain, no relics, no explanations, only silence. Every Deathwing warrior inducted into the hunt is given a list of names, an internal codex of suspected or confirmed Fallen. Most are code names. The Hollow Voice, Brother Unseen, Aegis Shattered. Each entry includes known aliases, last sightings, suspected psychic powers, or heretical alliances. It is a list without end, and each warrior is expected to carry it, in mind, in mission, and, should the moment come, in memory if they fall. Each captured Fallen is brought back to the dark cells, a vault buried so deep within the rock that even many chaplains have never seen it. There, the interrogator chaplains begin their sacred duty, attempting to extract a confession, not information, not battle data. Confession. Only by naming their crime, acknowledging their betrayal, can the fallen soul be cleansed. Few reach this point, fewer still survive it. Some have knelt and wept, most resist, many die. None are ever seen again. And still the hunt goes on, because for every name struck from the list, 3 more arise. The warp scatters the fallen across both stars and time. Some appear centuries after being presumed dead. Others lead crusades under false flags. Some twist the history of the heresy to their advantage, painting themselves as the true loyalists. And the Deathwing must chase them all, across ruins, hive cities, demon worlds, blackstone vaults, and shattered moons. This is the hunt eternal, a war without banners, a crusade of silence, a task not measured in victories, but in the thinning of a ledger inked in shame. For the Deathwing, this is not duty, it is identity. To wear the bone armor is to bear the weight of the fallen. To walk in silence is to keep the secret. To hunt is to seek not only justice, but the redemption of an entire legion's soul. And they will not stop, not until every last name is struck through, not until the final brother is judged, not until the lion's honor is restored, or there are none left to remember it. To face the enemies of the Imperium is to know war in all its forms, the howling tide of orcs, the spectral malice of necrons, the clawed hunger of tyrannids, the whispered deceit of chaos. But when the Deathwing walks to war, they do so not merely with brute strength, but with weapons that carry legacy as much as lethality. Every bolt, blade, and relic they bear is not just a tool of death. It is an extension of oath and identity, tempered by time and tradition. To understand the Deathwing's arsenal is to understand their purpose. These are not weapons chosen for convenience or mass deployment. These are armaments steeped in meaning, some ancient, some esoteric, all deadly. From the storm-wreathed corridors of boarding actions to the dust-choked catacombs of demon worlds, the Deathwing's war gear is uniquely suited to their mission: precision, perseverance, and judgment. It begins with their standard, if such a word can be used, loadout, the Terminator pattern of tactical dreadnought armor, specifically the Indomitus and Cataphractii variants, maintained deep within the vaults of the Rock. Unlike other chapters who may outfit only their elite squads with such suits, the Deathwing wear Terminator plate as a matter of course. It is their second skin, not an honor earned temporarily, but a permanent mark of station. This armor, more than mere protection, is a platform, a walking shrine for the arsenal it bears. Storm bolters, paired with power fists, form the backbone of many squads. These paired weapons, used in tight quarters or charging lines alike, offer a balance of range devastation and unrelenting melee force. The Storm Bolter, a twin-barreled instrument of rapid fire, can cut down swathes of enemy infantry with blessed shells inscribed in high Gothic litanies. Each magazine is prepared by the chapter's reclusium, infused with oils of sanctity and housed within purity-sealed casing. But it is the power fist, often worn on the offhand, that reminds the Deathwing's enemies what true close combat means. With the force to punch through adamantium, disrupt energy fields, or crush Xeno's physiology into ruin, the power fist represents not just physical might, but righteous fury channeled into precision violence. For some, these arms are augmented further. Assault cannons, sacred rotary-barreled relics, are granted to warriors whose steady hands and implacable minds can handle their devastating rate of fire. When a Deathwing Terminator unleashes such a weapon, the battlefield shudders beneath the roar of its cyclonic barrage. Flesh is vaporized, armor shredded, cover obliterated. It is not a weapon of subtlety. It is a declaration. Nothing stands against us. Others are given Cyclone missile launchers mounted atop their Terminator carapace. These systems, capable of firing crack or frag payloads at range, provide the Deathwing with anti-tank capabilities, but more importantly, with reach. The Fallen often hide in the depths of fortified worlds, protected by walls of heretics or traitor engines. The Cyclone is not for suppressing fire, it is for punching a hole to the truth. Yet, for all the firepower the Deathwing carry, it is in close combat that they shine brightest. Not because they are brute berserkers, but because they are judges. And judgment in the end must be delivered face to face. Enter the Thunder Hammer. Wielded in both hands by those who forego ranged weapons entirely, this relic is more than a club of energy. It is a relic of Calibanite heritage, a symbolic tool of execution used in knightly duels long before the Imperium ever came to that cursed world. In the hands of the Deathwing, it is transformed, a weapon capable of ending demonic abominations, crushing dreadnoughts, or silencing traitor champions in a single blow. The Storm Shield, often paired with it, is a wall in itself. An ancient technology reinforced with psychic wards and protective circuits, long lost to Mars. It does not simply block attacks. It absorbs the fury of the galaxy, allowing the bearer to wade through flame, shrapnel, and psychic maelstrom unscathed. Together, these weapons create the Deathwing Knights, elite within the elite, the sanctified core of the company who are tasked with confronting the most dangerous foes, including the Fallen themselves. Their signature weapon, however, is unlike anything seen in the rest of the Imperium. It is the Mace of Absolution. These power maces, unique to the Deathwing, are crafted not only for their crushing force but for their symbolism. They represent more than destruction. They are instruments of atonement. Forged from alloyed ceramite and bound with Baroque iconography, each Mace of Absolution contains within its haft a reliquary, often a bone fragment of a Deathwing martyr, a sliver of the lion's armor, or the ash of a burned oath scroll. When they strike, it is not just the weight of a weapon, it is the force of an unbroken lineage demanding accountability. The Deathwing also possess a number of plasma weapons, including the revered plasma cannon and plasma talon, miniaturized for Terminator use. These weapons are volatile, dangerous, as likely to incinerate their target as the wielder. And yet, the Deathwing bear them with steady resolve, because for them the risk is acceptable. If it means bringing down a corrupted war machine or melting through a traitor's sanctuary, then the cost is clear. Rare still are the relic blades, forged before the heresy, wielded only by Deathwing champions. These blades are rumored to have been quenched in the blood of traitor primarchs or forged in the heat of Caliban's heart. Whether myth or truth, their edge is unquestionable. They can sever warp flesh, cut through void shields, and burn with blue-white fire that reflects not the sun, but judgment made manifest. Every piece of this war gear is maintained with rituals that would bewilder even a tech marine of another chapter. The rites of assembly performed before battle involve not just oiling and loading, but the recitation of the bearer's service record, the engraving of fresh oath runes on the casing, and the silent naming of the last foe slain with that weapon. It is said that the Deathwing never take a weapon to battle without remembering who died under its last strike, because memory is their sharpest edge. The sacredness of their arsenal goes even further. The rock contains within it the armory of the first sin, a sealed vault guarded by triple-code Genesede locks and interrogator chaplains sworn never to speak of its contents. It is here that the most ancient weapons of the Legion rest, relics from before the fall of Caliban. Some say there lies a blade once carried by Zahariel himself. Others whisper of a bolter loaded with only one round, engraved with the phrase, "For the last." Who it is for, no one says. Perhaps no one knows. But one day it will be fired. And so when the Deathwing deploy, their weapons do not shine with vanity. They are not decorative. They are not loud for theater. They are quiet until needed. But when they speak with the voice of the lion. Blade and bolter, hammer and shield, fire and silence. This is the Deathwing's arsenal. Not chosen, but inherited, not wielded, but born. And in every thunderous step, in every crackling impact, in every bolt screaming toward heresy, there is a single enduring message. The First Legion has not forgotten, and it never will. In the deepest vaults of the rock, in chambers untouched by time or flame, dwell beings that are neither wholly known nor fully understood. They move without sound, speak in riddles, and are never seen in the light. Most who serve the Dark Angels have only heard the rumors. Fewer still have caught a glimpse. But the Deathwing, they walk among these shadows as kin. They are the Watchers in the dark, and they are real. To the uninitiated, the Watchers might seem like myth, whispers told to frighten new recruits or justify strange disappearances during battle. But for the Deathwing, they are not legend. They are allies, guardians, and in ways the Imperium would never sanction, advisors in the war for the Legion's soul. Describing the Watchers is difficult, not because their deeds are few, but because their very nature seems to resist definition. They are small, cloaked figures, barely waist height to a space marine. They appear in moments of quiet dread or imminent crisis. They do not speak aloud. Instead, their intentions are felt, conveyed through presence, posture, and the unsettling certainty that they know more than they reveal. Many Deathwing warriors believe the Watchers have been with the First Legion since before the heresy. Some claim they walked the dark forests of Caliban, standing vigil over the Lion himself as he hunted the monstrous beasts of that cursed world. Others say they were first seen when Caliban fell, emerging from the ruins as if called by the planet's death. What is certain is that the Watchers are not human, nor are they Xenos in the traditional sense. They are something else. Some say warp spirits made physical. Others whisper they are remnants of the Old Ones, ancient beings who once manipulated the flow of galactic destiny. There is no imperial record that classifies them, and this suits the Dark Angels just fine, because the Watchers, whatever they are, serve a purpose too valuable to question. Their role within the Deathwing is elusive but unmistakable. In battle, they often appear when sacred relics are drawn, particularly when the Deathwing Knights unleash their ancient war gear. The Mace of Absolution, or the shields carried by the Inner Circle's Chosen. It is said that the Watchers bless these weapons before they are unsheathed, murmuring incantations only they understand. Others insist that the Watchers act as custodians, ensuring these relics are not misused or tainted by pride. Perhaps the most famous example of their presence lies with the Lion Sword, the masterwork blade of Lion L. Johnson himself. Before the Lion's return in the Era Indomitus, the weapon was locked in the deepest sanctum of the rock. None could access it. None even dared try, for the Watchers stood guard. Day and night, year after year, they held silent vigil over the sword, and any who approached without the proper rite were met with a presence so cold, so wrong, that they fled in silence, never speaking of what they had felt. When the Lion finally returned, it was the Watchers who brought him his blade. They did not bow, they did not speak. They simply held it aloft, and the Lion took it, as if the blade had been waiting all this time for that single moment. The Deathwing who bore witness to that exchange said nothing during or after, but every one of them had the same thought. The Watchers are not servants, they are stewards, and the Lion is still their master. But the Watchers do more than protect relics. They guide. In operations involving the Fallen, it is not uncommon for a Watcher to appear during planning or immediately before deployment. Sometimes they place a single parchment on a war table, a fragment of an intercepted code, a star map with one system marked, or a name scratched in an ancient dialect. The Deathwing never question the source. They simply act, and more often than not, that name or location leads directly to a confirmed Fallen. The most veteran among the Deathwing speak of this guidance as intuition made manifest. as if the Watchers see the threads of betrayal stretched across the stars, and with unseen hands pluck one taut so the Deathwing may follow it. There is one story, passed only within the inner circle, that speaks of a mission that would have ended in disaster had a Watcher not appeared. The Deathwing had cornered a notorious traitor known only as Veilbearer on the industrial world of Safrax III. A full kill team was deployed, weapons primed, teleport coordinates set. But moments before activation, a Watcher stepped into the chamber. It held out a hand. Nothing else. Just a gesture, palm up, unmoving. The operation was aborted. 2 days later, Safrax III was consumed in a warp incursion. The entire region of space was cut off, time itself shattered across the sector. Had the Deathwing deployed, they would have been lost. Instead, they waited. 1 month later, when the warp storm cleared, they struck. And they found not only Veilbearer, but 2 other fallen hidden within his cult. All brought back for judgment. No one asked how the Watcher knew. No one dared. And yet, not all their interventions are so grand. Some are subtle. A whisper in the mind of a chaplain. A glyph left, carved in the stone outside an interrogation chamber. A single candle extinguished in a ritual hall, indicating that a captive's resolve has broken. Their ways are unknowable, and yet deeply trusted. This trust, however, is not without limits. There are those within the Deathwing who view the Watchers with suspicion, not hostility, but caution. For all their help, the Watchers remain mysterious, and their motives unclear. They serve the Dark Angels. But do they serve the Emperor, the Imperium, or something older? Some whisper that the Watchers are guardians not of the chapter, but of the truth itself. That they are the final failsafe. That if the secret of the Fallen were ever to be revealed, it would be the Watchers who would extinguish those responsible, regardless of rank or blood. Whether this is true, no one can say. But their power is not questioned. Even Azrael, Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels, refers to them as those who see beyond. And he, like the Deathwing, treats them not as inferiors, but as equal custodians of the Legion's fate. One final tale must be told. It is said that in the Vault of Echoes, a chamber within the rock so deep it hums with the pulse of the void, there is a circle of stone. At its center lies an obsidian throne, unoccupied. No one sits upon it. No one dares. The Watchers visit it often. They place objects before it. Fragments of relics, torn oath scrolls, even broken chains. No one knows why. The Deathwing are forbidden from entering. But once a dying knight was brought before the throne. He had captured a fallen, but was mortally wounded in the process. As he bled out, a Watcher stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, until his final breath passed. When his body was recovered, a single line had been etched into the wall beside him. Not by his hand, but by something else. He died facing the truth. That, perhaps, is the essence of the Watchers in the dark. They are not weapons. They are not soldiers. They are keepers of secrets, of relics, of fate. And though they cast no shadows, though they speak no words, though they leave no footprints on the ground, the path of the Deathwing has always been guided by the unseen hand. There are secrets that protect empires, secrets that shape wars, end civilizations, and doom worlds to fire. But within the ranks of the Dark Angels, there exists a secret so corrosive, so ancient, that the chapter has built an entire structure to contain it, a labyrinth not of stone, but of oaths, rituals, and silence as heavy as ceramite. At the heart of this labyrinth stands the Inner Circle, and its most trusted agents are drawn from the ranks of the Deathwing. To speak of the Inner Circle is to risk everything. To know is to be burdened. To question is to invite suspicion. And yet, for those who bear the white bone of the First Company, silence is not merely a shield. It is the soul of their duty. The inner circle is not a formal body in the traditional imperial sense. It does not have defined ranks, open meetings, or visible banners. It does not report to the High Lords of Terra, nor acknowledge the edicts of any other chapter. Its authority is autonomous, its existence denied even within the Codex Astartes. Yet it holds the power to command entire companies, seal records, or even order the execution of a space marine. At its core, the inner circle is dedicated to one purpose: the hunt for the fallen angels. Those dark angels who turned traitor during the Horus Heresy and whose survival threatens the very honor of the chapter. But this mission, vast and unending, demands more than firepower. It demands secrecy beyond comprehension. And so the Deathwing, the elite of the chapter, become not just warriors but sentinels of truth. Only within the Deathwing are aspirants drawn forth to serve the inner circle, selected not for glory, but for resolve, obedience, and the ability to shoulder a burden that could break even a Primarch's will. To become part of this shadowed order is not a promotion, it is a transformation. The ritual begins with the Rite of Truth, a secret ceremony that takes place deep within the rock, where starlight never reaches and the echoes of ancient betrayal still seem to murmur through the walls. Those selected are brought before the Watchers in the dark, not by choice but by silent summons. They kneel, not knowing what they are to be told. They are stripped of rank, name, and expectation, and then they are told the truth of Caliban, of Luther, of the schism that tore the Dark Angels apart, the fact that some of their brothers turned upon the Lion, sided with the traitors, and now wander the galaxy as cursed remnants. The truth that for 10,000 years the chapter has hunted its own kin, and that even now this legacy of shame defines everything the Dark Angels are. Some cannot accept it, some rage, some weep. A few are simply broken, never returning from the chamber, their names erased from memory. But those who endure, those who nod and rise, are marked. They become knights of the inner circle. Not all Deathwing belong to this secretive cadre, but all aspire to it even if they would never admit it. Those who are inducted find their duties doubled. They still fight alongside their brothers, still serve as vanguards of the chapter, but now they bear an additional weight to ensure the secret remains buried, at any cost. If a fallen is encountered and a witness not within the inner circle learns of the truth, it is the knight's responsibility to determine that marine's fate. Sometimes the solution is initiation, to bring the warrior into the fold. More often the solution is silence, a bolt around, a training accident, a misreported casualty in the fog of war. It is brutal, it is thankless, it is necessary. Within the rock, the inner circle meets in chambers known only as the Sanctum of Silence. There, decisions are made that shape the chapter's entire strategic direction, not based on galactic threats, but on rumors of the fallen, sightings of tainted armor, or intercepted whispers from cults on the edge of the Imperium. The Grand Master of the Deathwing, often among the highest members of the Inner Circle, acts as both warlord and judge. His authority is absolute. He can deploy the First Company without consulting Azrael, Supreme Grand Master of the chapter. He can seal records, alter mission logs, and recall strike forces from battle if the hunt demands it. This autonomy is not a matter of convenience. It is a safeguard. The chapter cannot afford delay when a trace of the fallen emerges. A single hesitation could mean a traitor vanishing into the warp again, to poison another world, to spread doubt among the faithful. But the cost of such secrecy is immense. Many Deathwing warriors live entire decades without speaking a full sentence outside of combat. Their minds are trained not only to remember tactical data, but to compartmentalize truth. Many practice mental blanking, a ritual form of self-erasure to avoid the risk of psychic intrusion. Chaplains of the Inner Circle undergo rites so severe they are said to burn out the capacity for empathy. The weight of such knowledge bends even the strongest. There was Brother Neveron, a Deathwing veteran of 90 years. He had brought back 6 fallen alive, survived the redoubt of Varos, and bore the scars of Demon Blade and Xenos Talon alike. But when the truth of one of his captured brothers, a former mentor, was revealed, Neveron removed his helm, wept in silence, and took a vow of silence for the remainder of his service. He fought for another decade, never spoke again. When he died, his final act was to record the name of his mentor on a scrap of parchment, fold it, and hand it to a watcher. It burned in his palm the moment they touched it. There is no glory in the Inner Circle, no medals, no banners, only the unending vigilance of those who know that the truth is not a torch to light the way, but a fire that must be smothered, lest it consume everything. Outside the chapter, no one knows of their existence, not the Inquisition, not the High Lords, not even the Primaris reinforcements granted during the Indomitus Crusade. And if any ever came close to suspecting the truth, they were silenced, either by misdirection or blade. Even within the chapter, knowledge is tiered. A battle brother may fight for centuries and never learn the true history of Caliban. A veteran sergeant may only suspect. A company master may be shown a glimpse, and spend the rest of his days uncertain whether it was truth or test. But the Inner Circle knows, and so too do the Deathwing who have passed their final trial. They are more than warriors. They are the watchers behind the watchers, the guardians of a secret that would fracture the chapter and perhaps even the Imperium if exposed. In a galaxy of open heresy, the Inner Circle must carry a hidden sin, and so they bear it not with pride, but with a grim resolve forged in silence. Because in the end, what binds the Dark Angels is not loyalty, not even honor. It is the shared burden of guilt, a guilt passed down like a relic, an oath spoken in whispers, and a truth that can never be known except by those willing to kill for it. The galaxy has broken open. The light of the Astronomicon flickers across half the stars. Warp storms rage unchained. Empires collapse in silence. Planets vanish beneath demonic tides, and the heavens burn in a fire none can name. But amid this ruin, there are warriors who do not bend, do not falter, and do not die. They stand as they always have, resolute, silent, and deadly. They are the Deathwing. And in the shattered age of the era Indomitus, they fight not merely for victory. They fight to ensure that the secrets of the past are not swallowed by the apocalypse of the present. When the Cicatrix Maledictum tore the Imperium in half, it did more than break the stars. It fractured the lies that held the galaxy together. Truths long buried began to stir, ancient sins began to whisper from the shadows, and the fallen, those scattered remnants of the Dark Angel's shame, began to emerge once more. The Deathwing had never rested, but now they moved with renewed fury. At the edge of the Great Rift, in systems once thought secure, fallen warbands emerged, some wearing the armor of the First Legion, blackened and warped, others disguised among renegade chapters. No longer scattered individuals, these traitors began to coordinate, as if drawn together by a force none could see. The Inner Circle feared the worst, that Luther, the greatest of the fallen, long imprisoned, had escaped, or worse, begun to gather his sons once more. If true, then the Hunt Eternal had become a war renewed. But the galaxy did not wait. The Indomitus Crusade, led by Robert Guilliman, demanded that all loyal chapters commit to the defense of the Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the galaxy where the light of Terra could no longer reach. The Dark Angels, ever secretive, gave little explanation, but they dispatched forces nonetheless. And among those sent, the Deathwing were always first. On Gathelmore, where heretic cults had seized a cardinal world and summoned demonic hosts, the Deathwing deployed with surgical brutality. Entire cathedrals were reduced to rubble. Librarians detected warp echoes resonating with phrases used by the Fallen during the heresy. It was enough. The Deathwing scoured the planet in a silent purge, executing not only the cultists, but several captured loyalist Astartes suspected of harboring forbidden knowledge. No records of the operation remain, only whispers that angels of bone passed through the storm, and nothing was the same after. Elsewhere on Zalix Prime, a Deathwing strike force responded to a distress call from an Adeptus Mechanicus outpost. They found no survivors, only a fractured cogitator network looping corrupted recordings of a space marine in broken green livery, quoting catechisms in Old Calibanite. The Deathwing traced the signal to a hidden bunker 6 kilometers beneath the crust. They breached it. Nothing came out, not even a report. Only a single sigil was burned into the outpost's walls, the first nose. But the greatest change in the era Indomitus came not from the stars, but from within. The return of Lion L. Johnson shattered the silence. The Primarch of the Dark Angels had long been presumed dead or lost. In truth, he had slumbered in a hidden chamber deep within the rock, tended by the Watchers in the dark. His reawakening came at a moment of apocalyptic crisis, and it changed everything. When the Lion rose, clad in new armor, bearing a blade none had seen in 10,000 years, the Deathwing were the first to kneel, not in reverence alone, but in recognition. For in the Lion's eyes burned the same truth they carried. He remembered Caliban. He remembered the betrayal. He remembered the Fallen. And he had returned not to forgive, but to judge. The Lion did not take the reins of the chapter from Azrael, nor did he command the Imperium at large. Instead, he vanished into the shadows, gathering a force known as the Risen, mysterious warriors drawn from across time and space, many believed to be redeemed fallen. The Deathwing's role grew more complicated, for the Lion had not abandoned the hunt. He had simply changed its terms. No longer was it enough to destroy the Fallen. Now some could be redeemed. Confession was not merely demanded, it could lead to purpose. This caused schisms within the inner circle. Some, especially the old guard among the Deathwing, could not stomach the thought. To them, a Fallen was a traitor, full stop. Others saw the Lion's return as a chance to evolve, to shift from vengeance to restoration. Amid this conflict, the Deathwing did not waver. They adapted. Deathwing squads were now deployed with silent augurs, devices attuned not only to biological signs, but psychic echoes of guilt and identity. Interrogator chaplains were reassigned as liaisons to the Lion's personal crusade, and in at least 3 confirmed instances, Deathwing Knights escorted captured Fallen not to the dark cells, but to the Primarch himself. None have spoken of what transpired in those meetings, but one of those captives was later seen fighting at the Lion's side. The Primaris reinforcements, introduced by Guilliman during the Indomitus Crusade, were also a point of contention. For years they were kept at arm's length, not because of doubt in their loyalty, but because of what they didn't know. Primaris Marines, born of Call's genius and Terra's vaults, knew nothing of the hunt, the fall, or the shame that defined the Dark Angels. Integrating them into the Deathwing required caution, trials, observation, and in some cases, revelation. One such Primaris, Brother Captain Alarion, fought with distinction during the cleansing of Veltheron's spire, where a rogue inquisitor had allied with a Fallen, posing as a black shield. Alarion's leadership was instrumental in the kill, but when he questioned the target's identity, he was taken aside by an interrogator chaplain. He returned 3 days later, pale, silent, and changed. Within the month, he was seen wearing Deathwing bone. And so the chapter endures. In a galaxy ablaze where the warp bleeds into real space and demons walk in human guise, the Deathwing remain what they have always been, the first company of the First Legion. But now they walk an even narrower path, one foot in the past, one in the storm. Their arsenal is unchanged, their armor remains ivory, but their purpose has deepened. They fight not only for vengeance, not only to silence the past, but to shape the future, one secret at a time. Their vigilance has expanded, new sectors, new leads, new protocols for identifying the fallen in worlds overrun by warp phenomena. It is said that even within the Crusade fleets, the Deathwing maintain their own shadow lists, names of allies, commanders, and even other chapters suspected of harboring truths too dangerous to share. They do not trust, they verify, and when necessary, they act. In the era Indomitus, the Deathwing are no longer just hunters of the past. They are sentinels of continuity, defenders of a truth too dangerous to be revealed, and now, perhaps, guides for what the chapter might become. Because the lion has returned, the rift still grows, the Imperium bleeds from 10,000 wounds, and the Deathwing, they watch, they wait, they strike. For the hunt is not over, and neither is their war.